The fist struck the soldier's jaw with a sickening crack, knuckles meeting bone in a moment so brazen, so unthinkably disrespectful, that the crowd gasped as one. The young man who threw the punch, a broad-shouldered bully draped in arrogance, smirked for a single heartbeat, basking in the false triumph of humiliating a uniformed guard. But before the grin could settle on his face, the consequence arrived. Teeth, small white fragments of his bravado, flew from his mouth in a glittering arc. His laughter died as quickly as it had been born, and silence fell heavy across the marble plaza of the tomb of the unknown soldier. The one he had struck did not flinch. The guard remained rooted, unmoved, as if chiseled from the same stone that bore the names of those long gone. His eyes did not lower, nor did his hands raise. He was a sentinel sworn to silence, a living monument to sacrifice. The weight of centuries seemed to press into his spine, yet he bore it without a sound. The bully's knuckles had found not weakness but the steel discipline of a man trained never to bend. The crowd knew instinctively that they had witnessed not an assault on flesh but an attempt to wound honor itself. The guard's name was Daniel Hayes. To strangers, he was only a face in a crisp uniform, unyielding, unreadable. But beneath that disciplined stillness lived a man carved by war and loss. The public could not see the long nights when he woke gasping, images of desert skies and bloodied sand clawing at his memory. They could not hear the letters he whispered to names etched in stone, friends who never came home, brothers in arms who entrusted him with their last breaths. His silence at the tomb was not only for the nameless fallen buried beneath the marble, but for those whose laughter still echoed in his ears, though their bodies lay half a world away. He had not planned to become a guard. After his discharge, Daniel had drifted. His right knee ached from shrapnel, his mind from survivor's guilt. He would sit at kitchen tables and pretend to listen while his eyes traced the movement of shadows, every sudden sound igniting old instincts. When the letter of acceptance came from the regiment that protected the nation's most sacred ground, he had felt a stirring in his chest. To stand watch, silently, endlessly, was to anchor himself. It was duty without speeches, honor without applause. Here he would keep vigil, not for himself, but for every voice cut short too soon. And so he stood day after day, beneath sun and rain, through jeers and through reverence. His silence was his vow. But silence invites test. Tourists with restless hands drift too close, children murmur during the changing of the guard, and sometimes, rarely, there are those who mistake stillness for weakness. Today's bully was one of them, a young man full of loud laughter, egged on by friends who mistook cruelty for courage. His voice had risen above the respectful hush of the plaza, mocking the guard's rigidity, sneering at his uniform. When words had not provoked a reaction, fists had followed. The world seemed to hold its breath in that instant, waiting to see whether honor would collapse under insult. It did not. Daniel remained as immovable as ever. The blow had landed, yes, but in striking, the bully had revealed his own fragility. His body reeled, teeth scattering like brittle glass, as though invisible hands had seized him and delivered the very justice he sought to defy. The onlookers, at first silent with shock, felt their silence deepen into something heavier, shame for their inaction, reverence for the unshakable figure who had borne the insult without retaliation. For a moment, no one moved. The air smelled of cut grass warmed by the sun, of stone heated through with centuries of weather. The faint rustle of leaves along the walkway whispered like an audience too respectful to applaud. Daniel's breathing remained steady. The bully, meanwhile, crumpled, blood coloring his lip, his arrogance draining in crimson rivulets down his chin. His friends, once emboldened, backed away, their laughter gone, their eyes darting to the watching crowd for escape. The injustice of it all weighed heavy on those who had stood by. A tourist clutching a flag lowered her gaze in shame. A father pulled his son closer, realizing that silence in the face of disrespect was complicity. Yet the guard's own silence was different. It was not cowardice but power. By refusing to break, he had already won a battle larger than fists. Daniel's mind wandered, just for a breath, back to the men he had lost. He remembered Marcus, who had joked about baseball games while bleeding out in his arms. He remembered Ellis, who had taken shrapnel meant for him. He remembered how their faces had faded into memory even as he forced himself to live. His silence now was for them, because words could never repay what they had given. When he whispered in his heart, he said only, "This is for you. Let them try to dishonor your sacrifice. They will not succeed." Tension grew as military police began to advance from the periphery, their boots striking with precision. They had seen the strike, seen the blood. They knew the law. Disrespect to a guard at the tomb was an offense not against a man but against a nation's collective memory. The bully looked up, eyes wide, his earlier bravado dissolving into panic as the uniformed officers approached. His friends scattered, abandoning him in the weight of his crime. The crowd began to murmur now, a tide of outrage swelling into something else, a quiet solidarity for the sentinel who had endured. And then, as if one heartbeat moved them all, the crowd straightened. Tourists removed hats, veterans saluted, children stilled their fidgeting. 1,000 unspoken apologies filled the air, directed toward Daniel and the nameless soldier beneath the stone. The plaza became a sanctuary again, not of marble but of human reverence. The bully, clutching his jaw, now stood as the smallest figure among them, reduced not by fists but by the immensity of the silence he had tried to break. In that moment, one truth crystallized in the air, sharp enough to etch itself into memory: silence can be louder than violence. Daniel's stillness had not just endured the blow, it had turned it back upon the one who delivered it. His lack of reaction was the reaction. His unbroken posture was the answer to every insult. Those who watched would carry that image home with them, the soldier who did not raise a hand, yet who stood taller than anyone else on earth. An older veteran in the crowd whispered to his grandson words that would later echo across social media: "You cannot break a man who stands for the fallen. You can only break yourself against him." And from another onlooker, spoken softly yet carrying the weight of generations: "Some battles are won not by striking back, but by refusing to fall." The officers led the bully away, his arrogance gone, his punishment certain. But Daniel remained, as always, unmoved. Minutes later, when the ceremony of the changing of the guard commenced, the ritual unfolded with even more gravity than before. Rifles clicked, boots struck marble, and silence pressed thick over the gathering. No one dared whisper now. Every head was bowed, every heart humbled. The bully's punch had not diminished the ceremony, it had magnified it, drawing sharper focus to the dignity it demanded. When the guard's shift ended and Daniel marched away, still without a word, the crowd parted like water. A path opened before him, not demanded but given freely, as if the onlookers now understood something they had not before. A little girl saluted with her tiny hand, tears in her eyes though she could not say why. A veteran wiped his cheek, murmuring to no one in particular, "They never really leave us. Not while men like him stand watch." The lesson lingered as the sun dipped lower and shadows stretched across the tomb. Respect is not owed because a man wears a uniform. It is owed because of what the uniform represents: the silent sacrifice of those who gave all they had, including the right to speak for themselves. Guards like Daniel speak for them, not with words but with their unbroken silence. For those who witnessed it, the day would remain unforgettable. They would tell the story of the bully whose arrogance shattered against a wall of honor. They would repeat the image of teeth scattering on marble, of a soldier unflinching, of a crowd that rediscovered reverence in the face of disrespect. The story would live on, whispered across dinner tables, shared in classrooms, recounted at family gatherings. And with each telling, the silence of one man would echo louder, teaching future generations that dignity does not shout, it stands. And so the reflection remains: in a world where noise often drowns out meaning, there is a rare kind of strength in silence. It is the strength of standing unbroken when insulted, of honoring sacrifice without needing applause, of carrying invisible battles with steady shoulders. Respect is not merely courtesy, it is a recognition of unseen wars fought on our behalf. The question left to those who watched, and to all who hear this story, is whether they too will stand silent when respect is tested, or whether they will lend their voices to honor those who can no longer speak. Wherever you are in the world, pause for a moment and consider: who in your life stands silently for you, carrying burdens you may never see? Share your thoughts, share where you're watching from, and remember that every story like this honors not just one sentinel, but all the silent heroes who keep watch in ways we may never fully understand. Subscribe and stand with them, not in noise, but in reverence.